All right, what's up, everybody? We're back, and we're going to talk about one of our favorite groups today, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let's talk about this genius group right here who just got busted, of course, funding the KKK, the Unite the Right, all sorts of wonderful people. The people that the Southern Poverty Law Center claims they were founded to fight. So how the hell can they spend $3 million funding groups like the KKK and still have the left defending them? I don't know. Let's dig into it. We can find out here. So, first of all, who is the SPLC? If you are a normal person who works every day, probably don't know who the Southern Poverty Law Center are, but they are an evil leftist organization that's committed to stoking racial hatred, and they're stooges for the Democratic Party. They're backers of the KKK, apparently. They claim to be arbiters of who is a hater, and that just happens to be, of course, everybody who disagrees with their socialist agenda. So I figured today we would peruse their website, see what's going on in the world of the SPLC, a raving band of lunatics who funds some of the worst people on the right. And so, of all the people I thought were out there funding the KKK, I didn't have the SPLC on my list, but you know who did know that the SPLC was funding all these right-wing organizations? Alex Jones. So if you guys have a jar that you put $1 in every time Alex Jones is right, you got to add another one. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But for right now, let's do this. Let's go to the SPLC. First things first, right here, apathy is not an option, which is an insane tagline to have on your website. So that just tells you right away, these people feel like, not only if you're just not somebody that agrees with them, so put that out aside. If you disagree with the SPLC, you're already some kind of fucking evil person to them. But that's not the standard they set. They're saying apathy is not an option. So even if you're somebody who's not enthusiastic, which is what apathy means, you're not real enthusiastic about the cause. If you're not enthusiastic about the SPLC and anti-racism and DEI and all things they have going on, that's not an option. You are already a bad person, even if you show apathy towards the SPLC. Completely put aside that there are millions of people who disagree with them, and they'll put you on a list as being some kind of hater or terrorist or something. But already, apathy is not an option. You can already just tell these people are left-wing extremists. That's like, it might as well be silence as violence. Like that's the kind of shit these people believe. So let's go in, take a look, and see what we are not allowed to be apathetic towards. So first thing we got here, should we do some learning for justice? Some racial justice issues? Let's do some racial justice. Let's talk about dismantling white supremacy. That's kind of a topic these days since they were funding white supremacy. So let's see what we got going on here. In public forums and online, the Southern Poverty Law Center exposes hate and extremism and counters disinformation and conspiracy theories with research and community resources. Interesting. What an odd way to expose hate and extremism. By paying for it. Okay, whatever. But it's a complex problem and we can conquer. Hate violence is everyone's problem. Wow. Back to the apathy thing. Okay. The far right fuels extremism, and apparently the SPLC funds the far right. So I guess the SPLC is fueling extremism, which I guess we always knew. That was kind of a stupid point. But eradicating hate starts with communities. To push white supremacy out of the mainstream. You probably didn't know white supremacy was in the mainstream because it's not and hasn't been for a really long time. But whatever. And we got to remedy the harm done to communities. We must intervene proactively by supporting grassroots partners and building resilience to extremism. Wow, doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't that make it sound like you want to give money to something like this? I mean, imagine you're a dumb person. You would read this and you would think, yeah, this sounds like a great group. So maybe you write them a check for a couple $100. Now, you don't know that you're like paying the salary of the Grand Wizard of the KKK, but whatever, again, we're not talking about bright people here funding the SPLC, but a lot of people do. They raise $100 million a year, roughly. This isn't a small group. They have an endowment, $530 million. That's what this 501c3 charity, if you will, is worth. And they're into litigation, the research and analysis, what we're working on. Oh God. Let's see if we got something else here. What else can the SPLC give to us? Oh, we have something on the SAVE Act. So that's nice. Careers. Probably not a lot of people applying right now. But maybe let's see what kind of careers they got open. That looks interesting. If any of you folks want to go apply for the SPLC. Oh, here's a mission statement. Okay. To be a catalyst for racial justice in the South and beyond. Working in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy, strengthen intersectional movements, and advance the human rights of all people. Something tells me all people doesn't really include white people because, they say right there, they're for intersectionality. So I don't know, just a feeling. Let's look at this picture. They include some like self-hating white people in here. Yeah, of course they do. I would imagine most of the people at the SPLC are actually like self-hating white liberals. These look like some odd people, but anyways, we won't attack their looks or anything like that. Let's see the current openings. Blah 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 blah. IT Intelligence Project. Why is Grand Wizard not on here? What the hell? Policy, lame. Political, lame. Analyst, lame. See, this is bullshit. I know they're hiring more exalted cyclopses of the KKK. I know they are. They just don't want to post that on their website, those bastards. All right, let's see if we can find... Oh, there are militias that are going to respond to the Charlie Kirk assassination with calls for training and violence. Wow. Can't have that. You don't want, like, one of the biggest conservative leaders ever to have his followers arm themselves after he's assassinated. That would be insane. I'm sure the SPLC will tell you that Charlie Kirk's assassination was actually the fault of like right-wing extremists or something. But where is our heat map? What do we got going on here? Here we go. Let's go to the hate map. So a big thing the SPLC does is they keep a database of people, organizations, ideologies they consider to be hateful. They call it the hate map here. So as you guys can see, there are a lot of hate groups, quote unquote, in the United States. Obviously they're not. Most of these are made up. But let's go take a look. Let's go look in LA. And let's see what kind of, LA, a known hotbed for white supremacy. Let's see what we got here. We'll just keep zooming in, I guess. Oh, geez. Oh, here we go. California. Statewide, we have 12 hate and anti-government groups. I like how they put those together. Like in order to be anti-government, you have to be some kind of hater or something. Most of the people I know are anti-government. All the smart people I know are anti-government, but whatever. So let's look at gays against groomers. And they're statewide. They have a California chapter, and they are anti-LGBTQ. So you get that? These people are gay. They're against groomers. And so there's some kind of hate group. That's the kind of things that, the SPLC wants to call out. They're going to tell you the gays against groomers are anti-LGBTQ. Okay. I haven't dug into this group. I'm on full disclosure, not a part of the gays against groomers. But they don't really sound like they're LGBTQ. They sound like a pretty good group, actually. Act for America, Counter Jihad Coalition. Again, not a part of them, but sounds good. I don't like jihad. The David Horowitz Freedom Center, anti-Muslim. Let's see if we can find it. That's in Sherman Oaks. Let's zoom back in here on LA. Yep, man, look at that. Look at that. Sherman Oaks, my California geography is just on point. Able to find it right there. Okay, doesn't really want to work. Someone didn't pay the bills on their website. Oh, and PragerU, another an anti-government general group. So, the guys that, teach kids about liberty and freedom and all that kind of stuff. They are an anti-government hate group. This has been a great look. I really did not plan it out to go look at these groups like this. I really just thought we'll just peruse their website and see who they consider to be hateful. And this has been a great little sample of how ridiculous the SPLC actually is. And so then, let's back out of this. They keep... Let's see if we can find their list of hateful people. So they've got extremist files. Ooh. Hate map, hate watch, report hate, and tech watch. Of course, they were huge in the censorship game. Let's just go to frequently asked questions about hate groups and anti-government groups. Oh yeah, those guys look really scary. What is a hate group? Oh God. Okay. The Southern Poverty Law Center defines a hate group as an organization or collection of individuals that, based on its official statements or principles, the statements of its leaders or its activities, has beliefs or practices that attack or malign an entire class of people, typically for their immutable characteristics. There we go. And that's why PragerU is a hate group. Duh. Aren't you figuring it out? Let's see. Does violence play a role? Ooh. Vilifying or demonizing groups of people on the basis of their immutable characteristics, such as race or ethnicity, often inspires or is a precursor to violence. There we go. So yeah, their immutable characteristics. That's why one of their biggest groups on here is anti-government, because of course being in the government's an immutable characteristic. Duh. Remember, we're targeting dumb people here. We need to make hundreds of millions of dollars. Let's target the dumb people. All right. Okay, so the SPLC. That's a little bit of who they are. Okay, so what have they done, though? So we know that they're a group. They try and compile files of people they consider to be, extremists. They keep their extremist files. They've got their hate watch podcasts and everything. They're pushing for DEI, all that kind of stuff. But what have they actually done? Why is this group actually an evil leftist organization that stokes racial hatred and everything versus just trying to? What have they actually done? Well, these people, they pride themselves mostly on compiling a database of the political enemies of the Democratic Party. And then they smear those enemies as hateful. They purposefully try to conflate a large number of conservatives, like everyday Americans, with the few actual extremists. You saw in there a few groups that you probably wouldn't join, and then right next to the gays against groomers. That was a good example. So for another example, on their list, they have the KKK as an extremist group. Ironic, I know. And then they had Charlie Kirk, and they had TPUSA. In fact, the day before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, they wrote a hit piece on him. Charlie Kirk's name, and this is thanks to 1819 News, they reported Charlie Kirk's name is mentioned on the Southern Poverty Law Center website 38 times. Okay, that's in 38 separate posts, not to mention most of those posts mention his name multiple times. A report they released in May 2025, so a few months before Charlie was assassinated, was titled "A Year in Hate and Extremism." Included a section called Turning Point USA, a case study of the hard right in 2024. The report, which is part of the Dismantling White Supremacy series, targets Charlie Kirk and TPUSA. If you know anything about TPUSA, you've ever been on a college campus, ever known anybody in TPUSA, ever seen a video of Charlie Kirk, which I think everybody has at this point, you probably know he didn't represent the hard right. He definitely didn't represent white supremacy or something like that. The SPLC smeared him. And so in the post before Charlie Kirk was shot and killed, he was mentioned in the Montgomery organization, Hate Watch, part of the SPLC, again, their newsletter. And it boasts the Southern Poverty Law Center works to dismantle white supremacy in public forums and online, exposes hate and anti-democracy extremism, and counters disinformation and conspiracy theories with research and community resources. The Intelligence Project monitors and exposes white supremacy and its impact on communities. That's what they had to say in the same newsletter they were deriding Charlie Kirk. The next day, he's assassinated. And of course, the assassin that killed Charlie Kirk said, and I quote, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." So the assassin, he doesn't say that TPUSA, was some kind of evil organization he found on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, and he killed Charlie Kirk because of the Southern Poverty Law Center. But they were smearing Charlie Kirk as some kind of hater, and Tyler Robinson said he killed Charlie Kirk because he was a hater. I mean, and if that's not a clear enough example for you, in 2012, a man shot up the Family Research Council. He showed up with a rifle, and he tried to massacre as many of those people as he could. He said it was all about, Chick-fil-A giving money to the Family Research Center and some other organizations that supported traditional marriage. And so the SPLC put the Family Research Center on their website as an extremist group, and Chick-fil-A, had been in the news. So this guy was going to go kill everybody he could at the Family Research Center, and he had a bunch of Chick-fil-A sandwiches in his backpack, and he was going to throw the Chick-fil-A sandwiches at their dead bodies after he killed them as some kind of political symbol. Now, the security guard ends up being a hero and stopping this guy, and most of these people that go commit these crimes are a little feminine, not really capable of committing the crimes, thankfully, that they really want to. So this guy doesn't even make it into the building. He gets tackled by security. He ends up shooting the security guard, but the guard is able to disarm him. The guard ends up being okay. But this guy said specifically, he figured out who the Family Research Center was, again, a small think tank in Washington, D.C. most people had never heard of before that. He found them on the SPLC's hate map, the one we just went and looked at. That's how he figured out where he was going to go shoot up. Again, the Family Research Center, not a hate group, just they support traditional marriage. Nothing wrong with that. So real violence does come out of the SPLC's slandering of people for being haters. If these slanders were against Israel or something, they'd call them blood libels, okay? Because people really do get hurt over it. Charlie Kirk, again, can't draw the direct correlation, but it's pretty obvious that the Southern Poverty Law Center was contributing to the slanders against Charlie Kirk and TPUSA that got him killed. So then we would think, okay, this happened all the way back in 2012. Nobody would be paying attention to this organization anymore, right? They should be completely discredited. No, the FBI was working with the Southern Poverty Law Center in some capacity all the way up to 2018, maybe even after that. We don't know. They wouldn't disclose one way or another. They played a huge part in the censorship under the Joe Biden regime. Before Elon purchased Twitter, again, one of the greatest acts in modern American history that anyone's ever done for mankind. Real big friend of the show here, Elon Musk. Before he purchased Twitter, the SPLC was a part of Twitter's safety council that made content moderation decisions. So what would happen was Twitter would use the SPLC's databases and say, okay, this guy, will use Mike Cernovich because he was on the list. Mike Cernovich is some kind of male supremacist or, some shit the SPLC made up. And so they're going to shadow ban him. And Twitter can wash their hands of it and say, no, we consulted outside safety partners. That's how we decide how our algorithm works, blah, blah, blah. And again, Twitter has thousands of moderators. They're able to shadow ban people like Cernovich. In fact, let's go take a look at some of the people the SPLC had on this list. It shows people like Matt Walsh, Mike Cernovich, and they've got him here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Let's actually start at the top. We've got Stephen Miller, born 1985. He's located in Washington, D.C. He is related to the topic of anti-immigrant, because that if you want to not allow 10 million people to come across your border, you are going to be labeled as an extremist and you're anti-immigrant, just like Stephen Miller. Then you got Matt Walsh, related to general hate. Which is pretty funny because they're saying that, in order to end up on their list, you got to, have something specific, right? Like you're some kind of guy who's against, you're in the KKK, you're a racist or something. Nope, just general hate, which is kind of weird because you'd think if you hated everybody, that's not really being discriminatory. You hate everybody equally, whatever. But he's also anti-LGBTQ or something because he made What is a Woman. Then you got Mike Cernovich. He is related to male supremacy, born 1977, lives in Orange County. Thanks, Mike. Then we've got Chaya. Don't know much about him. Born in 1995 in Delaware and Florida. Poor bastard. Hopefully he's spending more time in Florida. James Lindsay, the anti-communist, famously on Twitter. Great follow. He's anti-LGBTQ and a conspiracy propagandist. And then finally, you've got Prager University, anti-government in general, in Sherman Oaks, California, which we already looked at. Absolutely insane thing to have up on your website there. So those were the people that were being targeted by the SPLC for online censorship. And they were doing that with Twitter. And then they started doing it with Google and YouTube, owned by Alphabet, both, of course. So what they were doing was they had, you can run ads on Google. They have, obviously, the search engine where what would happen was, let's say you were Breitbart. And because this did happen to Breitbart, I'm going to use them as an example. And you look up, Donald Trump election victory, something kind of broad. Breitbart is not going to show up in your search results. Instead, they're going to send you to NPR or PBS or something because the SPLC was working with YouTube and Google. They're open about this. And the SPLC had designated Breitbart as an extremist hate group. It'd be like if you had typed in, that you wanted to research the Proud Boys or something. The Proud Boys website isn't going to be the first one that comes up. You're going to find PBS articles and CNN articles on the Proud Boys. They're not going to direct you to that website. But they were doing that for just normal right-wing news. Breitbart, the Daily Caller, the Daily Wire, Fox News, all that stuff. That's what they were doing. Donald Trump's campaign website, famously, because Donald Trump, of course, is labeled as an extremist, and the SPLC, was a huge opponent of his. And the Facebook, same thing. Facebook tried saying, all right, well, we're just going to have third-party content moderators. Don't sue us. It's not our fault. Then they used people like the SPLC. So then here's the most, interesting part of it all. They want to censor you and me, and they want to make sure you can't see this show on YouTube. If they had their choice, we would all be kicked off the internet again, just like we were in 2020, 2021 during COVID for telling the truth. That's what the SPLC wants. That's what they try to do. Elon, as we've talked about in here before, purchased Twitter. He opens it up, becomes a free speech platform, and then all the other platforms have to do the same thing. They have to kick out all the moderators because it's just too transparently censorship after that. And then, of course, the Biden administration gets kicked out, who they were pressuring Facebook and the other platforms to partake in the censorship. So the tide starts to turn with the free speech. Now, so then we got to get into the irony of this whole thing is that the SPLC was making sure you couldn't see websites like the TPUSA website, that you couldn't watch Charlie Kirk's videos. They were shadow banning all of the influential right-wing influencers, the center-right guys. That's who they were restricting and shadow banning. But then at the same time, back to why we're talking about this at all, they were funding groups like the KKK. And so it's insane, but that's what was going on. Okay, we're back after our ad break there, and let's take a look. I've got us now. We're going to jump to Twitter, and we are going to listen to Kash Patel, not a friend of the show, but this is a good. He is on his way to attempting to redeem himself. So let's take a look at Kash Patel telling us why exactly he is indicting the SPLC.
Center, in a massive sweeping indictment, has been charged with allegations of fraud and using the banking system to perpetrate that fraud. I just want to talk about a couple brief things here. The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. I just want to say that again. They used the fraudulently raised money by lying to their donor network, thousands of Americans, to go ahead and actually pay the leadership of these supposed violent extremist groups. The groups, as the general laid out, include the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Unite to Right, National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, the Aryan Nation Motorcycle Club, and the National Socialist Party of America, and also the American Front. In at least one of these matters, our investigation revealed that funds were used to facilitate the commission of further state and federal offenses, totaling over $3 million. Furthermore, our investigation revealed that the Southern Poverty Law Center, on top of perpetuating this widespread, decade-long, multi-million-dollar fraud, conducted more criminal activity. They attempted to hide their criminal activity from our financial banking network. They set up shell companies and entities around America so that the financial institutions that we rely on as everyday Americans were deceived in believing that money was not coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the perpetration of this scheme and fraud, but rather fictitious entities they stood up to perpetuate this ongoing fraud. This is a serious and egregious violation of a group that purported to dismantle violent extremist groups, but in turn actually only fueled the hatred. This is
okay. So, dude, it's just insane that this is actually happening. It's like so out of control that they were trying to ban people like Charlie Kirk and funding the KKK. So I want to point out to another group here that he was using. He said that they were supporting Unite the Right. And you probably don't remember who Unite the Right is. But if you think back to Donald Trump's first presidency, the Unite the Right was the group that put on the rally in Charlottesville that had all those guys marching around in khakis with their tiki torches. And everyone on the right's calling them out for being a bunch of feds. And that's when Alex Jones actually came out and said, hey, the SPLC is funding this whole thing. These guys are all feds. It's all meant to be a show to try and rile up right-wing extremists and gin up violence and make people think that there's something more going on here than there actually is. The SPLC wanted to make it look like there were Nazis parading everywhere now that Donald Trump had become popular. Alex Jones was called a conspiracy theorist for this. He was widely derided. It was in his court documents from him getting sued as an example of one of the conspiracy theories he was pushing. And what do you know? The SPLC laundered $270,000 and funneled it to the Unite the Right. And so you might think like, okay, they were funding Unite the Right, but that's kind of a big group. They didn't necessarily have anything to do with the actual Charlottesville rally. No. They actually paid the $270,000 went to people that were actually there at Charlottesville organizing it and transporting people to that rally pretending to be Nazis. They funded the entire thing. And again, the whole basis of the SPLC is that they're there to debunk conspiracy theorists, and really they have the hard data. They can disprove everything that's going on. Meanwhile, they're partaking in an actual conspiracy to make it look like there are Nazis marching around everywhere. And Alex Jones called this one, and he was completely right. So again, the SPLC, $270,000 to Unite the Right, the Charlottesville. And I think that there was a car that drove into one of the protesters and somebody got killed there. Like there was actual violence going on at this Unite the Right march, and somebody died, and it was all astroturfed. It was ginned up by the SPLC, and it was made to look like something much bigger than it was, and somebody got killed over it. Okay, we are back. So we just covered the Charlottesville stuff. Again, $3 million to white supremacist groups. And so then imagine that. Imagine how you feel. You're one of those dumb people. You gave your money over to the SPLC, and then you find out that they were actually giving it to the KKK. And remember, you're somebody, if you're a Southern Poverty Law Center donor, you're somebody who probably lives in a pretty nice neighborhood, probably a white liberal who walks around and you feel better than everybody else. You see somebody in a MAGA hat and you're just like, what kind of trailer trash, tacky, racist crap is that? And you hold your nose up at them and you're, I'm so glad I'm not a bigot like that. And then you find out that money you were donating actually was going to the Ku Klux Klan. I hope you feel like an asshole. I really do, because again, that guy walking around in the MAGA hat never gave any money to the KKK. He wasn't marching around in the Unite the Right. He wasn't a part of the Aryan Brotherhood or anything like that. But you know who was funding all those? The rich liberals giving to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Those are the people making sure that the racist hate groups actually stay afloat. And all this, again, you and I are actually subsidizing it because all those donations to the Southern Poverty Law Center are all tax deductible. So these rich people, they don't want to pay their taxes. Their tax accountant calls them up and says, hey, you know what? You are going to have to pay Uncle Sam a lot of money at the end of the year. You better start making some charitable contributions. And so you go to your spin class, and you know what? All the other women there, they donate to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so you ask, hey, you see the SPLC T-shirt on some. Hey, Becky, what is that? What are you doing? Oh, it's this great group. They fight racism. So you should give them money too. You need to make some contributions for your taxes. Yeah, give to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Then you can be a good person like the rest of us. Then all the money goes to the KKK. And then you and I have to pay our taxes because we don't have a ton of extra money to be giving to the KKK. So you know what? We pay the government. We keep everything afloat. That way they can, fight their endless wars and give all our money to people who don't work and all that kind of stuff. But because we're not good people, we can't donate to the KKK and then not pay our taxes, like the Southern Poverty Law Center and their donors. So we're subsidizing the whole thing anyways. So really, we're not that good of people. We're the suckers. We pay our taxes and the KKK still gets their money, whatever, right? So, and then of course the SPLC, as you just heard Cash Patel saying, they got to make sure they set up their shell corporations. They keep a lot of their endowment in the Cayman Islands so that none of this gets caught. Joe Biden knew they were doing this, but the investigation got shut down because of course it did. They don't want to reveal that they're top attack dogs. The Democratic Party stooges are out there, giving money to hate groups. Because remember, they got to sell us that PragerU's the real hate group. I mean, come on. Those cartoons about like supply and demand, you can't be having that. We need more marches with tiki torches. That's what gets the people going. That's what keeps the donations flowing in. And that's really the whole point behind all this is the supply of racism couldn't keep up with the demand. So what you had to do, there weren't enough actual Nazis marching around. So they said, you know what, the Nazi party is going to go bankrupt. And if the Nazi party does go bankrupt, then the SPLC is going to have no one to fight. They're not going to be able to keep, putting out all of their alarmist newsletters. They're not going to be able to scare all their donors into thinking the next Nazi rally is going to be happening in their neighborhood. So they got to gin it up. They got to make it look like it's real. They can't let the Nazi party go to waste here in the United States. They got to keep them well funded. So they keep marching around looking like a bunch of feds. They're all plants, of course. And, then the SPLC's got to make sure they're going after conspiracy theorists because, anybody that thinks that the Southern Poverty Law Center is the one funding the Nazis. I mean, come on, that person needs to be censored and thrown off YouTube, or somebody might find out that they're actually right. And the SPLC is actually funding the Nazis to the tune of millions of dollars. So can't have any of that. Sorry, Alex Jones, you were right again. And on that, I think we are just about done here. We have really hit it all. Southern Poverty Law Center. I hope they go bankrupt. I hope. They have been a plague on this nation for too long. They are totally anti-free speech. They're against everything this country actually stands for. And they're against, the one thing they purport to actually be for, racial equality. They're not even really for. The whole thing is just so fake. It's almost comical. You wouldn't have ever thought 10 years ago that Alex Jones would be right, that the Southern Poverty Law Center is actually the one making sure the Nazis have enough money to transport everybody to Charlottesville and, go ahead on with their rally. That all seemed like crazy back then. And now you're like, they were actually doing it. They were actually committing banking fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, all to make sure their tax deductible donations were funneled to the Nazis. All right, well, there we go. I think we have beat that horse to death. If you were planning on donating to the SPLC, save your money. I've never thought that giving the money to the government might be a better idea, but in this case, it actually is. I couldn't tell you why. I never thought I'd say it, but I'd rather you pay the IRS than give your money to the SPLC. But that's it. All right, see you guys.